Line Extra, your weekly Galway GAA podcast with Ollie Turner and Sean Walsh in association with Seymour's Lochray.
Welcome on in to Over the Line Extra. It's Ollie and Sean with you as ever on a Thursday afternoon. Now, just to clarify before we start, there was no incident before the ball was thrown in on today's episode. But Sean obviously got a lick of a hurl somewhere along the line at the end of the championship matches last weekend.
The last ball.
And it's always the last
ball.
The
last ball came in high, went into the press area, and Farrell went up with the hurdle. Canavan came across him, and look at who got it in the middle.
And that's why we talk about left hand on top.
Left hand on top. You can, every single time it's one of them that does it. 82 stitches, sorry, 4.
But still.
Looks
anyway,
the part though, doesn't it?
He's not going to be affected for the weekend after next, because we do know the quarterfinals are on.
Yeah.
2 Saturday, 2 Sunday on the bank holiday weekend.
On the bank holiday weekend, yeah. So look at no more than what we were talking about this morning or today. We're at the real business end of both championships right now. I suppose the hurling has taken a little bit longer to get there with the preliminary quarterfinals, but probably 3 of them went to long expected lines last weekend. What a weekend of weather, by the way. Cripes
we're
almighty.
probably lucky that so much actually did go ahead.
Yeah.
They probably took a bit of it was probably lucky that Duggan Park was the venue for the junior intermediate double header.
Yeah.
But that intermediate game, let's talk about that first. Clymer finally getting there.
over the line,
And you could sense, Sean, I was watching the stream and listening, obviously, that they learned so much from last year as regards how they closed that out in the last couple of minutes.
And probably if it went on, extended the lead out to 4 and did that very well. And it's a huge achievement, and I think it's nearly a relief more than elation initially to finally get over the line. And if we can actually put up the graphic there for next year for the new format of the Senior A, the new format for this A-team Senior B, and the intermediate championship that's there. So proudly now in that intermediate championship from the first game are of course Ballygar, who have to be one of the stories of the weekend.
Well, that was an incredible junior final.
It was.
Because in fairness to Shkabellu, as our commentary team were referring to them, but Shkahanna Mobilya Moylock made a real game off
They
that.
did.
And they must have felt gutted to be picked at the death.
They did, and even Noel McDonough, had come back late to join the squad, made a difference when he came in. But Ballygar is a story. They're now an intermediate team, and in there, we see Tina Avijanari on the flip side of it going down, losing their status last weekend. So on the right-hand side there, we see the 16 teams that are in next year's intermediate championship. Then we see this new format 8-team championship, which is where Clymer now proudly sit. Ollie, I have them in alphabetical form there.
What does that mean though, Sean? Like that middle, are they in no man's land?
It's a standalone championship. Okay, so they cannot go to the left channel to the Senior A next year and compete for what we'll call it the Tom Callinan Cup. But they can compete for, and I presume there will be a cup put up, and probably there's a lot of possible people that it could be named after that have done great work down through the years. But that's an 8-team championship. I don't know how it's going to go, Ollie. It is, looking at it now, will they play 7 games? Will they put it into 2 4s?
And play a double round.
I think what will happen in time is that it will morph into maybe the intermediate championship in time. You can see the 16 teams on the right as you look at the graphic. Will they move up? Would you bring 8 teams up from that in a few years to make it intermediate championship?
Through the chair.
Through the chair, yes, go on.
So those guys in the middle, outside of the county then, they have nothing to go for. Like, there's no competition for them.
No.
I presume you're still down to the Abbeynock-Moy, Spiddle Down
as the intermediate winners to represent to go on. Yeah. And we presume that as well. Now, whether that could be tweaked or whatever. And then you see on the left-hand side, you have the 16 A teams who will compete in the new senior championship. And look, we went through all of the possibilities at the start of the year. This is the format that's going to go into place right now. There's no doubt that the 16 team, 4 groups of 4, I would assume, is going to be hugely competitive.
I mean, that's serious.
Yeah, that's serious.
No, I'm just thinking about, because what you're still looking at is the intermediate championships are still the 25th best team in Galway going by the rankings.
Well, you're 16 and 8 is 24, so the winner is 25. Now, you can see in the intermediate championship there on the right-hand side, with say Tina Avijanari coming down now, Millie Kerkert is still there, Rahun are still there. That's going to be a very competitive championship as well.
But again, I keep harping on about how Cork and Kilkenny keep winning the Intermediate All-Ireland every year is because it's their 15th or 16th or 17th
by right, you would say the Intermediate champions now should be the 17th team
100%
in Galway at
and
least.
then watch Galway win the Intermediate All-Ireland at club level,
a good run
every second or third year as distinct from one
and it will be interesting to see how this new 18 format goes, Because look, at the other side of it is for these teams, if you do win a cup, say Clymer coming up, but you know you have the Bahas, you have the Athen Rise, Kilnadeem, Leitrim, Mellows, like the last two, Kilnadeem and Mellows could have been in the senior A,
Just as
you know.
easily, yeah.
So maybe they win the trophy. We'll call it the Ollie Turner Trophy next year. They win that cup, they're promoted to senior A the next year. Maybe that's a stepping stone. But look, it's intriguing to see where the teams have landed.
Cork have a scenario like this, haven't they? Where they have like a premier competition,
yeah, they have,
and then a senior.
They have, yeah.
But
they have, yeah.
I think this is a kind of a hybrid model until we get to the nuts and bolts.
But look, there's no doubt we've seen it in the senior championship right now with the 212s even. It is hugely competitive. It's now going to get more competitive with 16. The intermediate is 16. So this new one in the middle is what we'll be looking at. But look at, hey, let's give it a chance and see.
Just a quick word before we go football, talking with Eddie Hoare, who's our guest on standby. So we know now that it's Larkin's Clarenbridge and Thomas's Capitagal on Saturday week in Kenny Park. That's after the weekend's matches. And then it's going to be Sarsfield's Portumna, Loughrea, Turlough on the Sunday in Ballinasloe, 12:15 and 2 o'clock. So that's going to be a clash with the county football final.
Yeah.
Always going to be some sort of a clash.
It's also going to be the change time. You're probably, people listening to us and watching us are saying, what time did he say again? But the time does change that weekend as well, if my memory serves me correctly.
Okay, so you're probably dark at 5:30.
Yeah, whatever. So look
it
is one, I have to say, bugbear of mine of the new system, that there's so many matches shoehorned into every weekend that we hardly, and look, we have Eddie Hoare as the guest, like, I mean, they were beaten in the quarter final of the football championship. You nearly don't have time to even think about that. You're on the next weekend to the next round, and it's hard going for many teams, but at the same time, this is the new format. Could we maybe put in a little bit more time here and there, maybe to give teams a chance? I don't know.
Well, see, the big problem is whatever way you do
your
it,
provincial championships coming then as well.
Your county finals are always going to be this time of year, and unfortunately the weather has changed. And Eddie, I suppose, the weather is going to be a factor again this weekend. So while all these group games in the senior football championship were played out largely in beautiful conditions and just amazing scorelines, you are starting to see in the last couple of weekends the scoring rate has dropped dramatically. And I suspect when we look at the two senior semi-finals, and we'll start with those, Eddie, you are looking at matches now that will be largely dominated by defenders, I suspect, as distinct from attackers because of the time of year. But I suppose being in the last four, that's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about, Ollie, and Sean has mentioned it as well. Like, that's the business end when you set out, regardless of when you start your season, that's where you want to be in the business end. And yes, weather is going to play a big role in the semi-finals, and it has played a big role as well in the quarterfinals too. Really poor weather, but look, as I said, business end of the championship is where you want to be, and whether it's raining or whether it's sunny, that's where you want to be.
It's where ye almost were, St. Michael's, pipped by Annadown. You just maybe left a bit too much to do and missed those couple of chances. I'm sure you had regrets, Ed.
Yeah, most certainly. Look, we were happy in the main with our year. We maintained our Division 1 status in the league. Against Annadown, we had the chances to win it at the end. We had hit the post, I think, in injury time in the first half. But again, weather played a big role in it. We probably had a lot of injuries. Eamon Brannigan came off. Ronald Gallagher was a big loss. So again, disappointed to not be in the semi-final, but also being realistic. We have built this year. We've probably, coming in this year, we'd have said quarter-final was probably where we'd expect to be. Next year, we'd be looking higher up the charts, and you can ask for no more. And what we would be looking for is just that continuity in terms of management. We have the same management team in place for the last 2 years, and hopefully they'll stay on again next year and look for us to transition up the ranks of senior football.
And Eddie, just as a player coming through it, we talk here week in, week out about, the 2 weeks between games. You have the 5 group games in the 10 weeks, then you're into the knockouts. It's hard going, isn't it? And you mentioned injuries. I think there isn't a team kind of left in the championship that hasn't injuries. There is no room here for getting, if you pull a bad hamstring, you're in trouble. But it is a fairly unforgiving schedule, isn't it? Albeit, I suppose, at least it's a schedule that you can adhere to.
It is unforgiving, and you'll see the teams with probably bigger squads and more depth in them are progressing. Personally, having been involved in this year's championship, I think it's been great to be involved in having a game every 2 weeks, albeit a difficult schedule, at least you know you have a game every 2 weeks. There's good fluidity in it. And look, I know the hurling is going to 16 teams next year, and I think that'll be positive too. Like I said, you're guaranteed your 4 or 5 group games, then you go into a quarterfinal, semi-final, final, and you just know where you stand. And I think from a club player's perspective, it's definitely been very beneficial.
That's ultimately the question, isn't it? The players like it. I think the players want it. And regardless of how we perceive it from the outside as being a little bit stressful on the limbs, I think players would have it all day long, a concise season. So let's look at your conquerors, Annadown, then, who had that extraordinary run in the last 2 weeks where they had a ridiculous amount of results to go their way and then produce a 12-point win over Barna. That all happened. They got the match that both Michaels and Annadown wanted. Now they're up against the Salthill Loughnacurra team, who everybody have been pitting in there just underneath Montpellier, Moylock, Moycullen and Corofin as being a genuine top 4 side. So Annadown will go in as underdogs again. Is there any way Annadown could end up in a county final at the end of this weekend?
Look, again, Ollie, having spoken about the weather and the various different conditions, that can be a very much a leveller. I think from the outside looking in, Annadown would be very, very happy to be in a county semi-final. Again, they maintained their Division 1 status, progressed quite well through the league, and probably for them, they'd probably admit themselves that they're in bonus territory at the moment. But that said, they're playing Salthill, and it's a great opportunity for both sides. Salthill, on the other hand, have regrouped this year again under John O'Mahony, and probably a little bit unlucky in fairness. I would think last year they lost to a late goal, I think, against I think it was Monavea in the group phase. Did very well to beat Barna then in the last group phase, but found themselves out of the championship because the 2 groups of 3, which was an unusual structure that they put in. They've regrouped this year. Obviously, John O'Mahony's come in, Sean Armstrong, Finian Hanley, and Norman Costello. And look, just looking at their side, they're sprinkled with really good talent and seem to be getting a lot out of those players. Looking at their team that played the last championship weekend, a lot of those players have played, be it minor, under 21 or senior, have worn the maroon jersey. On the other hand, Annadown, having started the championship slowly, are full value again, like I said, for their semi-final space. They've won their last 3 games in the group. They beat ourselves in the quarter-final and are there on merit. And like I have previously mentioned, both teams will look at this as a great opportunity to get to a county final. But notwithstanding the county final, both teams are seeded for next year's championship, so that's a real big bonus for both.
And of course, you also look at it, Sean, in the context of how a championship works out for you in the draw. And for Salthill, okay, they had a big scare with Tuam Stars and were probably lucky enough to come through that fixture. But if we're talking about a top 4 of Montpellier, Moylock, Moycullen and Corofin, like for Salthill to win the championship, they're only going to have to beat one of them in the final. As a start from, it could have gone wrong and they might have to beaten all 3. So it's fallen nicely for O'Mahony in that context as regards what they have to do to go and win it. But again, let's look at from a Salthill perspective, Damien Comer is an obvious starting point as regards trying to negate his threat, Frankie Burke up front. But, what else do Salthill have to do to try and, make life as comfortable for them as possible to get into a county final, Eddie?
Yeah, Annadown, the obvious threats is your Frankie Burke inside and Damien Comer, like you mentioned, and they'll have to negate their influence. If you look at throughout the group stages and the quarterfinals, they've been their main scorers and most of their scores would come from them. But they have a very solid half-back line of base there, Enda Malarkey, Dara Meehan, Owen Curry, who were really good base coming forward. So Salthill will have to negate their influence to make sure that the ball going inside to Damien and Frankie isn't at the quality it has been previously. But they've definitely, Damien and Frankie Burke and Damien Comer are the 2 obvious weapons that Annadown possess, but to be fair to them, they use them very effectively. And to date in the championship, like I said, the scores don't lie. They've been very, very effective, and their conversion rate has been very, very high. So they will take stopping.
You're only a mile from the pitch, Sean, where you live. What's the mood out in Down? Like, do they have a chance? Do they think?
Yeah, they would. And like, in fairness, Down, Eddie, they're a real championship team. You know, I mean, is it 5 championships they had? Was it the 80s? They were the dominant force, you could say. But there's a rumour around. Well, it's not a rumour. He is now back. Owen Kieran is back in that squad. Was tagged, I think, as part of the quarter final day. Owen Kieran was in Dublin. I think training in Dublin or whatever. He's a serious addition now to a defence that I think is only conceded is that they've kept 4 clean sheets, I think, in the championship with James Healy and co at the back, right? If you throw in Owen Kieran, he's the typical modern cornerback, like, won't shy away from doing whatever is necessary to stop his opponent. Ryan Ford is now back as well. I think he came on or was part of the quarter-final panel as well. So that's 2 additions to them, right? They are up against Salthill, who is it 11 goals they've scored in the 6 games. I know they got 5 in one of them. So you're looking at, on one hand, a team that doesn't concede much versus a team that can score. Now, the other flip here, lads, is that they met in the group, right? And I think Rob Finnerty was extremely good. Salthill were very comfortable that evening. So often you see in a secondary game, and mindset, Eddie, like, will Salthill be saying, look, if we do everything right, we should get over the line, and Down will probably say, Jesus, we were way off the pace that evening. So is there a kind of a psychological swing there almost?
Yeah, personally, I it's never nice to play a team a second time. They will learn from that and expect, and I think they were bet by 10 points in the group phase, and that's a fairly big beat. And Robert Finnerty was excellent the same day. But Down will have learned from it again. Owen Kieran, if he is back, is a really good addition and one you prefer to have in your team than not. Ryan Ford has had a lot of trouble, hamstring injuries and that, and he was a very promising talent at under 21 level, and I thought he transitioned to senior, but bar injuries and studies, maybe he hasn't. But again, a really good addition for them. And Down have regrouped this year. I think they've, under new management, Alan Flynn has come in as well, and they just seem to be a happy camp. And it looks, from having played them in the league, having played them in the championship, they're very, like I said, they're very. It looks like a happy camp. Everyone seems to be putting the shoulder to the wheel, and they'll be happy with how their year has gone so far.
Having said that, Salthill have just an abundance of talent.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's very obvious to see why people were tipping them with O'Mahony in charge as having a say in this year's championship.
It's nearly like the perfect mix coming together, isn't it?
It's all about timing, I suppose, in one sense, Sean, you're right. But at the same time, even looking down on paper, like, they have an extraordinary bunch of footballers, and between the Culhans and Finnerty and
Finnerty came off injured the last day.
Yeah.
I presume, if there's any doubt there, did Mikey Culhan come off injured as well? So there will be niggles and injuries, but I know the picture you're painting. Like, Salthill are coming from.
It is formidable if you're looking at. I mean, you'd want 6 Owen Kearns to try and halt some of the forward power that Salthill have. But Down have to go somewhere and start somewhere. And Sean's point, Eddie, about a championship team, you know, certainly when it comes to the latter stages, Down were never found wanting when it comes to it. And even if there was a perceived gap between themselves and Corofin, they would always be really difficult to beat. But realistically, how do Down stop all these Salthill superstars?
Yeah, Salthill, it's no secret. I said a lot of them have represented Galway at various different levels, have won minors, have won under 20s, and in recent years probably found it difficult to transition to senior, be it that they have such an abundance of talent that lads didn't break in right away. It might have impacted the transition, but definitely this year they seem to be have definitely improved. They have a structure, a system that seems to be working, and they're getting the most out of their best players. Often when after a long condensed county season, you'd see some of the inter-county players can come back tired, lethargic. But in this case, the Salthill county players have been to the fore. You have Daniel O'Flaherty, who was in the squad, has been very, very effective. Cathal Sweeney at wing back. I think he's kicked 2-6 from wing back. And then up front, the firepower with Robert Finnerty and Tom O'Culhan have been really difficult for any defenders to deal with. And Salthill have been getting the most, again, out of their best players around the middle of the pitch. John Maher, another guy who I would have looked at as a potential Galway senior. I still think he has potential to be a Galway senior, but he's having a really good run with Michael Culhan in the middle of the pitch. And with such firepower on Salt Hill side and also on the Annadown side, the midfield battle between Annadown and Salt Hill could be have a big bearing, because if Salt Hill can win enough and get it into Robert Finnerty and Tom O'Callaghan, they're going to score. And on the flip side, if Annadown can get enough ball into Damien Comer and Frankie Burke, they'll do damage. So it's a big.
We've seen as well, like both goalies have been pretty impressive, Healy and Lavelle, during the course of the championship as well. It's hard to say either has a significant advantage there. Both keepers, I suspect, in Pearse Stadium, a windy Sunday afternoon, there'll be a bit of stress on them, get those kicks away, especially if it's into the wind.
Definitely, yeah. And two really good keepers having represented the county at various levels. Rory Lavelle, really good at his kickouts, and James Healy. James Healy can kick a 45. We've seen him against Barnet to put them into a quarter final. So that's a big asset to have on a wet, windy day, that you can score long range frees. But kickouts is going to be a big part in the modern game. But to be fair to them, they're probably two of the top keepers in the club scene in the county. So they'll have every confidence. But that said, with slippery, wet conditions, even the best keepers around are going to be under pressure, and it's up to whichever forward line is going to put that more pressure on the kick out, and who's going to work that little bit harder. Because when the conditions get greasy and wind starts blowing, it often comes down to football can often be parked, and it comes down to who wants it and who works harder.
Interesting. I mean, Salt Hill, obvious favourites. It's an obvious prediction to say Salt Hill. Is there any part of you, Sean, thinking Annadown could win this?
Yeah, look at it. I mean, you're probably, if you were told last January, if you were Alan Flynn or if you were John O'Mahony, you were told that you would reach a county semi-final, and for John O'Mahony, you were told you were playing Annadown. For Alan Flynn, you were told you were playing Salt Hill. I'd say they jump at it, right? They would have taken it.
How many Alan Flynns are there, by the way?
What's that?
How many Alan Flynns are there? Because there's a guy just like him who managed Mary's to win the Leitrim Championship
all over them. You have Jeremy Kilcommons as well, who has made Porry Choice's squad. Extended squad. So you have a lot of guys there. Look, it's a perfect thing. The one thing I would say as well, I saw in going back to the hurling, Cappatagal played Mike Cullen last Saturday in Pearse Stadium in a hailstorm. But the quality of the pitch was very decent, in fairness. Like, that drainage work they have done has benefited. You're into bad weather, you're into a double header. So, ground conditions are crucial as well in games like this, where, as Eddie said, this could come down to a kick out, it could come down to a free taker missing a free if in a tight scoring game. But look, I think the conventional wisdom is Salt Hill, but I'd say Annadown would be mad to go.
We're not going to ask Eddie to make a prediction, because it could cost him votes in the Knocknacarry area, and there's about 80,000 of them up there. So.
And he smiled when you said that as well.
Now, he's only loving Montpellier, Moylock and Mike Cullen, because he can feel free to say what he likes here. Third year in a row, meeting in the championship. Mike Cullen bet them in the county final. Montpellier came back with the 3 goals that decided last year's semi-final. So in a best of 3, this is like the decider. I mean, it's a heavyweight clash, isn't it, Ed?
It is, and in the start of the year, I would have said, and everyone probably would have said, they're the top 2, Montpellier and Mike Cullen, and maybe throw in Corofina and Salt Hill. I would have said it from the outset in terms of a top 4, but they are the heavyweights, and I would expect whoever wins this game will be favourites for the county final, and they have the form, they have the history. They're the last 2 winners of the county championship, and having looked at their form so far, it's has all the makings of a really, really exciting contest.
Is the fact that it's a semi-final, Eddie, even a little bit more restrictive, even though I know last year's a semi-final as well, but the semi-final day, you're so near, aren't you? I mean, you can touch reaching county final day. We'll talk in a minute about the fact that the final is 1 week after, which you nearly have to manage as well, but a semi-final is a tension-filled day, and you can almost think that while everyone is expecting a classic here, this could become a real iron fist fight, couldn't it?
It could. I'd say both teams will be nervous. Obviously, the prize is so big, a place in the county final the following week, and semi-finals aren't something you like to lose. Like, they're there to be won, and both teams will be going bald-headed to try and win it. They'll have learned a lot from the last 2 years. Obviously, with Mike Cullen beating Montpellier in the final 2 years ago, and Montpellier have come back now and won the title last year. So, like I said, 2 previous winners. So it is it is the makings of a really, really intriguing contest. And just tactically, I'm really looking forward to seeing how both teams head up, because, like we mentioned, they'll have learned an awful lot, and both management teams have remained unchanged. The teams are relatively unchanged. So it'll be fascinating to see how both teams line out and how it goes on Sunday.
Both were below par in the quarterfinals. Is it fair to say that, Eddie?
Yes, I'd say all four semi-finalists would probably say that they hadn't their best days in a quarter final, but still they all got the wins. Montbellew against Corofin, probably a stiffer opposition, and it was tentative, it was tactical again, and but they did show good resolve. That game was really, really in the melting pot, and they'll have taken a lot from it. On the other hand, Cullen, while they did lose, they did win by, I think, a point in the end. They were probably, maybe the scoreline didn't reflect that. I think they were a little bit more comfortable than that. But on the basis of the two quarterfinals, I definitely think Montbellew against Corofin was, they'll have taken a little bit more from that.
And you are going to, I'd imagine, Sean, look at the big county lads playing the biggest role as regards what's going to happen. And there are so many of them that are going to be on display. Mother of God, if you're Porrick Joyce, you'd be licking your lips at this one, thinking, these are my best lads. And like gladiators going at it, hammer and tongs. I mean, where do you see the main battles happening?
But sure, where does Sean Kelly go, first of all? Like, I mean, Eddie, when you were looking at that Montbellew attack, like, I mean, Owen Finnerty, I think at club level is, I won't say he's underrated, he's not under, everyone knows how good he is, but he makes things happen. Like, you have a forward line there in Montbellew. You know, Barry McHugh was shooting the lights out in the quarter. Sean Kelly, where do you play him? I mean, is he your full back? Do you push him out to the middle third? Who does he pick up?
Or that's exactly the point. Do you pit him against do you put him on McHugh? Do you put him on Finnerty? Do you assign him a specific
that's only one now possible matchup, like.
Yeah, it's a difficult question because Sean Kelly has such a big influence on Cullen, and you just negate his influence by trying to counter another player at club level. I don't think Cullen will do that. I'd expect that they'll try and let Sean Kelly have as much of an influence on the game as possible. He's played at wing back, he's played at full back at times, he's transitioned into the full forward line for Cullen this year. So I don't think they're going to use him as a man marker come Sunday, because simply the big influence he has on that Cullen side, that it'd be a big risk, I think, on Cullen's part if they were to try and cancel his influence by negating someone else.
You're looking at the midfield battle. Billy Mannion has been in superb form when he's been out there for Montbellew Moylock as well, and he's one of those guys that played a peripheral role for Galway. And do you think Porrick Joyce could look at him as regards, has he something more to offer at a higher level?
Yeah, Billy Mannion has really good first season last year, winning a county title. Had a great game. We saw him in Croke Park when he came on against Armagh. Wasn't phased and has had a fantastic club championship. Has appeared on the team of the week many times in various different positions. It's an interesting one with Billy Mannion in terms of his position and where he'll go. A lot of teams playing against Montbellew would tend to drop back a sweeper to try and negate the influence of their, like Sean said, their strong forward line. And in that instance, Billy Mannion generally pushes up and goes out the field, and that's the role he usually takes up. And he's been hard to counter in that role. He can carry ball. He's very physically strong, and definitely I think it's an option for Porrick Joyce next year, because he has all the attributes and seems very level-headed. Seems to, like I said, have the attributes. He's young. He's only getting stronger, and he's versatile. And you need versatile players in any county squad.
Of course, I mean, you talk about the shootout element of it then, Sean. So you're looking at, obviously, the Desi Keneally at one end, the Barry McHugh at the other, the free taking, all of that will come into the mix. I mean, at the end of the day, this will, I would imagine, Eddie, like the last 2 years, just come down to what actually happens in the duration of the game, and whatever plans you have, you've got to have players that can think on their feet and adapt to conditions and decisions. Black cards could have a big bearing as well on how you use an extra man for a portion of a game.
I think so, Ollie. Yeah, there's not going to be very little in this. Like I said, the two previous winners, they're there on merit. They're probably the two heavy hitters in the championship. Like Barry McHugh up front, Owen Finnerty, Patrick Kelly. That's a formidable full forward line. Patrick Kelly drops in and out of the full forward line, and I think he's got 6 goals to date in the championship. On the other hand, Barry McHugh is the top scorer. So they'll take a lot of stopping. Mike Cullen, on the other hand, Desi Keneally has been excellent right throughout the championship, and Peter Cook has really added an extra dimension to them. They get scores from other places like Owen Kelly, Paul Kelly, Sean Kelly. David Wynne is very good at centre back. So like there's so many household names there, you can just roll them off your tongue. And how each of them match up is going to be intriguing. For Montbellew, Michael Daly is a really, really big loss. Like he's arguably one of the best club footballers in the county. And he'll be a really big loss if he's not available for selection for Montbellew. But again, there's so many top players on show for both sides. It's going to be intriguing to see the matchups, and that's what I'd be interested in seeing, the actual matchups on Sunday. Like 2 years ago, Mike Cullen came to the county final. They got the goals at the right time, and Montbellew had no answer. On the other hand, Montbellew came back, and they looked like a team that just weren't going to lose any county final. And Frank Fox was theirs last year, and right the way through, all the way to the final, that's the way they were, and they won it. And this year has been no different. Both teams have been very, very good right through the group stages, and it'll be an interesting one again come Sunday.
It will. Something has to give, but we wish all 4 teams the very best. Ed, a quick mention, we've got 2 finals as well to look forward to. On Sunday it's the junior final, Athenry and Clifton trying to get back to intermediate, so we wish both those sides well. Both came through their provincial, or shall we say the Westboard and the Northboard finals in impressive fashion 2 weekends ago. Athenry obviously relying heavily on Tom Flynn, but they've got lots of quality in their group as well. No more than Clifton, who were very strong in beating Salt Hill's second team. So we wish them well. But for the few minutes we have left, we'll focus on the intermediate final. Dumore McHale's and Kilconnelly.
There'll be a bit of excitement down your way about this one now, I'd say.
Well, I'm perfectly positioned as Mr. Neutral right in the middle, coming from the parish of Milltown in
He's not going to call this one either, Eddie, with the looks of it.
But it is it's a great final, I suppose, for the board.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want a derby match to fill Tuam Stadium on Saturday. But again, you have an intriguing lineup here. What do you make of this one, Eddie?
Yeah, Ollie, at the start of the year, I would have probably pushed Dunmore in the bracket of maybe in the big 2 themselves, maybe Iron Islands. But Kilconnelly have come and really built, and a massive win against the Iron Islands in the last round. So it's a local derby, an intermediate final, and it's going to be a really pressure environment come Saturday. In terms of both sides, like the prize is so big, a place in senior football, and that's where any young guy putting on a Kilconnelly jersey, a Dunmore jersey wants to be. Where do I see it going? Like again, they've played each other earlier on in the championship. I think Dunmore won that in the group phases. Some really good sharpshooters for them, like Paul Mannion has been so good. David Prendergast, Michael Murphy for Kilconnelly. On the other hand, Porrick Costello, Jake Slattery, Shane McGrath, Matthew Reddington, like they've really good players in both sides. The intermediate championship is very, very, very difficult to win. Like these teams would have to lose 6 games to lose 6 games to be relegated again next year. They'd have to win 6 to be promoted. It's such a big swing. You often see teams that transition from intermediate to senior find themselves well able to adapt, and the standard of football actually suits some teams. And it's just for both sets of teams. I wish them both well. If I was to predict, I'd be thinking that Dunmore will be the favourites for it, but Kilconnelly have been underdogs in a number of games so far, and it seems to suit them. The prize of a potential Connacht Championship All-Ireland Series is massive for any junior or club, junior or intermediate team, and the same for Clifton and Athenry. I've been following Clifton. I have a lad here in the office that plays for Clifton, and like again, a real good potential to transition to an All-Ireland Series and represent Galway at the national level. And wishing again both sides in the junior the best and the intermediate, because the prize I know is so big to play. Where you want to be is representing your club at senior level, and two of those teams, or one of those teams, will be come Sunday evening.
We've often mentioned them with the parallels between Killimer and Dunmore, you know, getting caught or what, and not getting caught because the teams of Betham deservedly went up, but that pressure, is that a pressure as well on Dunmore? It's all about getting back to the final first of all, which is so difficult to do, But then you're 60 minutes away from, we have to correct what happened last year, whereas Kilconnelly will be coming in and they'll be saying, look, all this talk about Dunmore, make up for last year. We're here on our own merits. I mean, Niall Daly, for instance, he was one guy that really bolted for me just watching the Galway games, and by all accounts a big leader in that setup as well. Like, so the experience of being there last year may be a hindrance for Dunmore as well. And Kilconnelly, can they nip in and take advantage of that?
Kilconnelly won't be afraid of the occasion, that's for sure, and they won't be afraid of Dunmore. But you just think, in terms of quality, Dunmore have an awful lot. And Eddie rhymed off 4 of the names there, the top players, and that's before you start getting into the mix of the guys that I suppose are the real backbone of Dunmore over the years, like Declan Rattigan was super the last 8 fullback. He's been soldiering alongside Damien Reddington in that minor team that Paul Conroy was on in 07.
Yes.
Damien didn't play the last day. If he's fit, watch him have an impact in this county final. He's a serious player, but has had his injury problems this year. If they can get 15 minutes out of Damien Reddington, that could be the difference. The big thing in here is, have Dunmore learned from the final that they butchered against Letcher Moor last year? Because it was a match they should have won comfortably. They let it go. They only scored 1 point in the second half in Pearse Stadium, and lessons were learned. Dunmore went into that county final last year without a recognised free taker. For some lunatic reason, Pádraig Costello, a county footballer, was not on the frees in the final last year. It beggared belief. He's on them this year. I don't know what was going on. But he is just a cast iron quality player on any club team, and if they get him ball and earn enough frees for him to kick, I think that will be a big difference.
And even Pádraig Costello, I know there's a bit of background there now. He'd have good more blood in his veins as well.
Jesus, everything have to come back to Turlock more blood.
Has to. But is it fair to say, looking in from the outside as well, that Dunmore have been competing now with underage at A level in the last few years? I mean, didn't they beat Claregalway?
Did you see that result of last Sunday, Eddie, in the minor A football championship? Dunmore 3-18, Salthill 2-8. In a minor
so that's
A
a factor. That
final.
There's a bit of there's something coming upwards as well.
Dunmore lost last year's under 20 A county final on penalties to Salthill. So Sean's point, Eddie, Dunmore seem to have from 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, those lads now probably 21. From that 16 to 21 age bracket, Dunmore have A-level players comparable with anything in the county. How important is it for them then to get senior pretty quickly?
Yeah, it's vitally important. I know myself, having played intermediate in the early noughties to mid noughties with St Michael's, when you do transition to senior level, it brings everyone on in the club. Everyone just wants a piece of it. And Dunmore, you can see the fruits of the good work that's been done there, the brilliant development, and that doesn't happen overnight. It happens because people are buying in. People see that there's something good happening here, and it's fairly evident, and it's no coincidence that they are winning minors, that they're competing at the highest level in all grades. You see the Alan Glynn's minor team that won earlier in the year, really, I think it could be Pádraig Costello's brother is captain there, and he wants to play senior football next year. But irrespective of what's been done, and intermediate finals are generally very cagey, very nervy affairs, and there will be a lot more pressure probably on Dunmore, given the fact that coming in, like I said, they'd have seen themselves as a top. The success for them this year would be judged on going up senior, whereas Kilconnelly, I'm not so sure they would have them aspirations, albeit come Sunday when the ball is thrown in, that's all they want. That's all they want. And as Sean mentioned as well previously, like Niall Daly has had a really, really good year with Galway and seems to be a really good leader in that group of Kilconnelly players, and he'll take a lot of watching come Sunday. But it is all the makings of a really fascinating contest, and best of luck to both sides, I think.
Yeah, it'll be great.
You won't call it, no?
Kieran Quinn is the referee. I was interested, I read Darren's piece in the Connacht Tribune where he said the easy prediction here is when you put everything out on the table is Dunmore McHale's, and yet you start to look at it, and if this is the quandary, do you look at the motivation for Dunmore McHale's to right the wrongs of last year like Killimer did, or do you look at Kilconnelly, who have beaten and won 2 matches that they shouldn't have won? The victory against Glenamaddy, I don't care, hurling or football,
absolutely.
You will
13,
not see,
wasn't it down to 13 with you?
2 points down, 2 minutes to go, 2 men down. That was incredible, and that's where you start to believe, is your name on the cup? Is this meant to be our year? So Norman O'Brien won't have much need to motivate his troops. Kilconnelly, I know them, that's my neck of the woods. They are just such a proud, tight-knit community. They won't be backing off in any way, shape or form. It's just more about Dunmore for me. Can they get to the level that their players are capable of. They didn't last year, and if they don't this year, Kilconnelly will go through that door, and St. Malosh from Sligo are waiting 2 weeks after in the Connacht quarter final, and it's another open door for the winners of this intermediate championship to go off like Letcher Moore did on another journey into winning a provincial championship or trying to win it. It's going to be a cracking match, and I think it just comes down to mindset, it comes down to decision making, and it comes down to learnings. And it'll just unfold brilliantly between 4 o'clock and about 5:15 on Saturday. We'll be there broadcasting live, looking forward to it.
Do you know, before we wrap, isn't it the one thing we're seeing, we'd say take the preliminary hurling quarterfinals out, but up to that, the group stages, the 4 quarterfinals in the football, and I know I'm not trying to drive Eddie Cracked again, the margin of errors, lads, in the games were so tight, and we can see the transition difference as well from the group stages in the championship to the knockout stuff, where teams give you everything. And that's why, in these games at the weekend, the margins could be down to very, very tight one-score games, and everything is on the line there. One
thing we would say, Eddie, and we'll finish on this point as well, the GA at national level are pushing hard for Respect Referee Weekend as well. Every weekend should be Respect the Referee Weekend, but there's a particular focus on it this weekend. We wish all the officials the very best of luck, because as Sean said, the scrutiny on them now is so severe that every decision, you'd imagine, could have a bearing on whether a club is going to win a championship or not.
Definitely, Ollie, I fully agree. And look, it's an onerous enough task for any referee to ref a game. And at the moment, the way things have been, it's becoming more difficult to get referees across all sports. So it's important that that message is resonated loud and clear to both players, mentors, and supporters across all grades, and that referees are respected. Like I said, they're there to ref the game as fairly as possible. We can all make mistakes, and it's not intentional. So again, it's a very worthy campaign, and one that I'd firmly support, like yourselves.
All right, we're looking forward to the weekend. Don't forget live coverage of the intermediate final, 4 o'clock on Saturday, the 2 senior semis on Sunday, coming to you live from Pearse Stadium, and then it's back to the hurling next week as we try and get our heads around who's going to get through to the semi-finals with those 4 quarter-finals in the senior championship over the bank holiday weekend. Councillor Eddie Hoare, thanks a million for joining us.
Thanks,
Loads of votes in Saltail and Knocknacarra for Eddie, there's no question. And for you, Sean, I'm sure you'll be keeping a close eye on the neighbours and down, see how they get on against Saltail and Knocknacarra. Sean, great to chat again. Thanks, Eddie, thanks to everybody for watching in as well. We'll see you next week on Over the Line Next.
Over the Line Extra, your weekly Galway GAA podcast with Ollie Turner and Sean Walsh in association with Seymour's